So one of the things you should look through here, of all the things that we support and the statistics behind me is, how do you make it bigger? And the question we have to look at is whether it's an in-person service, software, or any type of information that we put out to the marketplace, it has to be scalable. So for every dollar I take in, I can't continue to spend 50 cents. I have to get the dollar and get it to 45 cents. I have to get the dollar and get it to 40 cents. As we get more and more clients and services coming on board, because in our world, essentially, my revenue is driven by either the number of accounts someone has or by the number of participants in their 401k plan. Okay? So again, we have to be able to scale very quickly, and we do that through mostly nationwide presence, but we also have to become this technology where we're a 24/7 operation. So if you think of running 3 shifts, either whether you're in Brainerd, as you can see, we have locations all over, primarily in Philadelphia as well. So we actually outsource some of our data processing functions over to Chennai, India. So right now, as we're closing down the markets, we have to do all the processing for all those accounts and all the trades that go along with the essentially 24,000 401k plans that we service. Is we have to be 24/7. Well, they're just gearing up in India as we're beginning to kind of shut down our normal shifts, and we've created an economy of scale. It was an interesting sell to go out there the first time and say, I'm actually going to work internationally to get some of this done, because not only do you have to essentially overcome a lot of the kind of market perceptions that are out there, there's also a lot of security that goes on behind that. I understand we have millions of social security numbers and essentially the assets go with it in our system. So a lot of challenges that we work across the line. But if you have to look outside of what you do day to day, and even sometimes your hometown, and say, I've got to grow this affordably, because we're a very low margin business. Brainerd operation, I'm going to drill it down a little bit, is what do we support here in Brainerd is essentially everything that we do within a census. So my particular business that I oversee here is in the left-hand column. Is we actually do education. We'll go out to the banks, the credit unions, or the large organizations on custom training, but we also deliver it through telephone seminars, and we've actually built internet learning modules. All that is done through the human resource expertise that we see here. And we take a lot of that to say, we've also migrated from opening all the accounts with a printed form. We now generate software that essentially is consumer ready. So one of the things, I'll give you an example, when I was at TCF, we'd open up the branch and we'd come in and say, I want to open an IRA. The documents that would come out, there were 3 very large documents, multi-part, that you had to fill out. Hopefully you did it correctly, and by the way, that established your IRA to make your $2,000 contribution. And just to say, you made mistakes. And again, these aren't real revenue drivers for those particular clients, but a necessary evil. So you ended up either calling your customer back and saying, oh, by the way, did your paperwork wrong, come in and do it again. So one of the first projects I had here was to say, let's build a web-based technology where essentially you can ask a series of questions and essentially have it select the forms, populate them properly, but also check for the compliance as you go through, that essentially you can do this transaction in 5 to 10 minutes. One of the first customers we had for that software about 10 years ago was Star One Credit Union, which is the credit union for Lockheed Martin out in California, obviously very technology oriented. They had an error rate for opening IRA transactions of about 50%. They put our software into place, and in less than 6 months, they were under 3%. So to kind of give you an idea, but that's the scalable, because everything that we also do, as you look at technology advances, print was going to go away. We had to become a software shop. So again, things will evolve, particularly under different ownership styles and so forth. So you have to be very flexible, and essentially, where am I going to get the funds to go build this IRA service center, and then what do I project the long-term growth is? The other thing that I would put out here is every one of these things that you see behind me is done. It starts with the humans that essentially make up the census. I said 1,100. One of the key things we did a number of years ago was put into place, and every one of the speakers did a great job of talking about the value of doing the annual reviews and essentially recruiting talent. And essentially for us, it's retaining the talent, because we make tremendous investments in the people. So we set out and we said our core values are people matter, quality first, and integrity always. And that's really what we put out, that every associate here, if you walk up and ask them and say, what's your core values? They live that. Okay? So again, it gave them a common theme to rally around and say, we're focused on making sure our clients are also taken care of. Taking into the home stretch, so I'm watching the clock, to get in is some of the things that we face on a large scale. To again, you folks have gotten in about 8 minutes, but I usually get about 2 hours with a client to explain what you do for a living. By the way, it's been 15 years with my family and I still don't get it. But we break it down into retirement and healthcare, and to break it down and some of the things in retirement with the, every administration brings its own rules and regulations. One of the things you see now is in a 401k program, everyone who offers a 401k non to do a full fee disclosure as part of the opening process and to give an annual update to every participant in the 401k program. That is a huge software investment, not just for us. When we think of our partners, which is Mutual Omaha, Vanguard, Merrill Lynch, again, tremendous software expense to make sure that is up to date. The other things you look at, healthcare, the Affordable Health Care Act. We support health savings account, but as those rules and regulations change, remember our customers at the banks and credit unions, they have to deal with all their employers in the area to answer these questions because now I have a healthcare issue and a question I have to deal with. So we have to stay up to speed on the market. Economic changes that shift. When I started in this business, there were roughly 15,000 community banks. There were roughly 12,000 credit unions in the country. Now they're sitting both at about 8,000 apiece. So again, the market contracts, but yet the population is larger. So again, you think of scalability and flexibility as we look at it. The other example I'd give you recently is you've seen some in the news, the Dodd-Frank Act. To give you some of the research that we have to do, the Dodd-Frank Act, the legislation itself is roughly 2,500 pages. Well, there isn't just starting with the legislation. By the time the regulatory bodies got done with that for banks and credit unions, there's an additional 5,000 pages of regulations that they have to face. So you look at my business and say, well, that's how they're effective globally. What I would also say is, don't get tied into your particular line of business as you look forward, because I understand a lot of it's in the Dodd-Frank Act, and I would tell you less than 5% of it has to do with retirement. The reason I study it is simply because that's what's affecting my customers. When you think of, they go through their loan portfolios, and now I have to audit them twice a year versus once a year, and all the rules and regulations change, but also change where their dollars went. So again, follow those things. Client mergers and acquisitions. I talked about the reduction as I now may have someone who's a very strong customer get acquired by somebody who's not a customer, and essentially how do you cross-sell that and get it back in. The other one is what faces a lot of these things, and I heard some of the panelists talk about it as well, is build versus buy. In my time here in the business that I oversee, I actually acquired 2 different companies, and I would echo what I also heard here is get them in the process. The sooner that you can essentially get into, like in our core values and our processes, you get streamlined. And you have to make some hard personnel decisions. There are going to be overlaps, at least there were in the worlds that I had to deal with. But you come out with a much stronger market share, but you also come out again with some diverse ideas, and again, listen to them as you get down there, they become more effective. Locally here, some of the things that we've talked about is staffing. Again, I am a human capital firm that has to go out and essentially build a scalable product. So as you look at this, it's an interesting story. When you think of the IRA compliance, most of your IRA compliance firms are within 60 miles of here. Why? Most of the people used to work here and they went out and worked on their own and said, I can do this better. So between here and St. Cloud, you're pretty much going to talk to all of us. The running joke that we have is it's all we have to do in the wintertime is to read IRS regulations. The other one that we look at as well as you get diversified is it's not just the human capital is what we do today. There's a tremendous competition in Brainerd for IT resources. Not just because the firms are evolving here, but it's also recruiting talent into your local area. So we become more and more involved with BLAEDC and the educational system here to say, how do I get people not only to stay here, but how do I get them back? Last thing I would talk about, and again, touched on community awareness. One of the things that we had essentially neglected in time, and I would say Arnie was very good with it at universal pensions, but as BICIS and so forth, when we got kind of caught in our 90-day rule, we kind of fell off the community map. So I walked through the community and said, well, you work for census, and you kind of get this blank stare of what do you do for a living? We need to get out, and I really look from the business perspectives, we have to drive that message. Is don't wait for the community to come to ask you because their day is as busy as yours is. So again, become very involved with the chamber organizations like BLAEDC, but also the schools, because one of the messages I've heard from local schools here, there's no good jobs in Brainerd. It just crushes you because it's like, I'm trying to fill positions and I can't. So again, become involved and become visible. And with that, I think I'll stay on target and turn it back over to Bud.
Schedule because I told these folks the reason they kept commenting on the time frame was because I was going to watch it like a junkyard dog. I didn't, and I let them go a little longer on almost each and every one, with the exception probably of Steve. But the reason I did was because I thought they were five very different perspectives, yet dealing with the same issue, and that's growth and how you handle that growth, particularly the growth of people. So I thought they were worthwhile promise you, we'll still get you out here at 7. We'll just move right along and we'll just talk twice as fast now. So what I'd like to do now, while I'm thinking of it, Steve, I'd like to thank you and your staff. This is the second time I've been in this building. And when I walked in the first time, I was expecting to see Eddie's done over somehow. And what a fantastic job, and probably credit to Karen as well for the work she did here, but what a tremendous job at recreating and reusing, repurposing this building. It's fantastic. And the number of people that hide in cracks and crevices out here is even more. But with that, what I'd like to do now is open it up for questions, and I'm sure you've got some. And what I'd like to ask you to do when you ask the question, you give us your name and the business you represent. We just want to get to know more about who's here and so on, so it's important we do that. But what questions come to mind, and what we're going to do is open up, you can ask it specifically to any one of the panelists or a general question, and we'll just see if there's a panelist or two who want to answer that. We may not give them all a chance to answer just in the interest of time. With that, questions? If you don't have any, you need to find them. Yeah.
Hey, Ed, you mentioned,
Carl, what's your name?
oh, sorry, Carl Singer. I serve on the Corning County Housing and Redevelopment Authority, but I also have my own consulting business in strategic planning and organizational management issues. And you said some of that promotion within was a challenge. And I know sometimes that a great engineer might not make a great supervisor or whatever, but you said finding those who could handle it. What lessons did you learn about who couldn't handle it? And if anybody else has anything to add there, I'd be interested in hearing that.
That's a tough one. I think we learn by experience. I mean, after we've been through a few cycles where we realize. Can you hear me?
Shot off.
Hello? Yeah, we realized that we ended up doing the following, and I don't know that I would say that this is the best way to do it, but we ended up, when we went to hire someone that was going to go into a supervisory or management type of position, when it came to hiring the engineers that were going to do design work or semiconductor work, the engineering lead that had the open rec, we trusted them to find good engineering talent. They could recognize that. When it came to management, we went to small teams that would interview as a team, that person, and spent more time than we had originally looking to see how they would fit with the culture, they would fit with our styles, and did they have the right background and experience. So the bottom line is we ended up not just leaving it with one person. Now, of course, when you got to the president, that's different. He might bring in somebody on his staff, and he might do that on his own. But when it came to bringing in the mid-level manager, that's how we did it.
Tom Hagelin with Brainerd Corporation. Howard, you mentioned about the clubs and about measuring outcomes versus the process. What did you do, if you could share, when you're measuring outcomes and those outcomes aren't reaching the goals that were set? How did you redirect those that were in charge of those particular outcomes?
Can everyone hear the question? Okay.
Is this on?
Who was the engineers at the table? It was. Very good.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay. I want you to repeat that question to make sure I answer it the way you asked it.
One of your bullet items was measuring outcomes versus process,
Yes.
which I agree with. When the outcomes were not satisfactory, or those senior managers in charge of particular outcomes were not meeting those goals, how did you redirect? What changes were made to reach those outcomes later on?
Well, let's assume that the individual is capable of meeting those outcomes, that you've hired and put in place the right individual to begin with. Okay, so let's make that assumption. Now, anybody